Yes, Kenya. Tamu sana, tamu sana, tamu sana, yes. Just as I did promise in our earlier video, I want us to have a look at a very interesting story. Ruto Gachagua spent shillings 9 billion in 7 months, asks parliament for more. President William Ruto and Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua have passed their full year budget in 7 months, official data show, amid austerity plans aimed at reversing a past trend of borrowing to fund government operations. The latest data published by Treasury Cabinet Secretary Njuguna Ndung'u indicate the Executive Office of the President spent shillings 9.09 billion in the period through January against an original full year estimate of shillings 8.64 billion. That represents an over expenditure of shillings 450.11 million or 5.21% of the original 12-month budget for the presidency prepared by the previous administration. The additional expenditure has already been tabled in the House via a supplementary budget under the law that requires MPs to approve spending that lacked a parliamentary nod within 2 months. Under the mini budget, Professor Ndung'u has proposed to increase the budget for the Executive Office of the President by shillings 5.18 billion to shillings 13.83 billion compared with the original estimates, a growth of 59.89%. State House budget has more than doubled to shillings 8.85 billion from shillings 4.37 billion approved under former President Uhuru Kenyatta, while Mr. Gachagua's office expenditure has been increased by shillings 9.14.25 million to shillings 2.63 billion. The Deputy President has also been added a separate budget of shillings 450.85 million outside the presidency, according to the supplementary estimates before the House. The over-expenditure by the Office of the President came in the period Dr. Ruto, who took power last September, directed the Treasury to cut the budget for running the government by as much as shillings 300 billion in measures aimed at bringing our country to sanity, where the state does not borrow to finance recurrent expenditure. Yes. In fact, it's a long story that we cannot go through the whole of it. But in this video, I want us to dissect this story for Kenyans to understand the games being played behind the scenes. If you are watching us, but you have not yet subscribed, subscribe, give this video a like. Let me summarize that long story. From that story, the first thing coming out very clearly is that in 7 months, William Ruto's office has spent 9.09 billion. According to the budget estimates or other plans, Ruto's office was to spend 8.64 billion in 12 months. In 12 months, Ruto's office was to spend 8.64 billion. In 7 months, Ruto's office has spent 9.09 billion. So in actual sense, Ruto has spent more than was expected of him in 12 months. He has spent more in 7 months. The second thing coming out very clearly, Treasury CS is asking Parliament through a supplementary budget to add William Ruto's office an additional 5.18 billion. Yes, so Ruto is just asking Parliament to add him more money because already has squandered the amount that was located for him. He has squandered the whole of it in 7 months. The year has not ended, so he's requesting for more amount, 5.18 billion. That's also something coming out very clearly. And then, if you compare Uhuru Kenyatta's budget and William Ruto's budget, in fact, William Ruto's budget has doubled that of Uhuru Kenyatta. Uhuru's office spent an average 4.37 billion in a year. Ruto is spending 8.85 billion in a year. But in fact, this figure is even increasing because of the supplementary budget. So in actual sense, Ruto's budget is actually tripling that of Uhuru Kenyatta. And also it's very interesting that William Ruto has been saying that his government is trying to cut on recurrent expenditure so that his government cannot borrow to sustain government projects. But from these figures, it's very clear that recurrent expenditure in Ruto's government has actually gone beyond even Uhuru Kenyatta's. So this government is spending more on recurrent expenditure than Uhuru Kenyatta's government. So even the saving William Ruto has been talking about, those are just hot air. This government is spending more on recurrent expenditure than Uhuru Kenyatta's government. So technically, there is no saving being done here. And for those who don't know, recurrent expenditure are basically luxuries. Things like refreshments, allowances, fueling of these so many vehicles that accompany these leaders to these prayer rallies and such kinds of stuffs, per diems. Those are the recurrent expenditure. And the interesting bit about it, all this over expenditure, most of it took place at the time William Ruto told Treasury to cut about 300 billion Kenya shillings to cut, or rather to reduce government's budget by about 300 billion Kenya shillings. So as the budget is being cut, you are seeing William Ruto's office actually asking for more money. And let me also bring your attention to this. Treasury has proposed to cut development spending by about 15% from shilling 715 billion to shilling 609 billion, while raising spending on recurrent activities by 6.6% from shillings 1.4 to shillings 1.49 trillion. This means the government will reduce development spending by shillings 106 billion, but raise recurrent spending by shillings 92.9 billion. So you are seeing clearly that Ruto's government is cutting spending on development while increasing spending on recurrent expenditure. And your guess can be as good as mine. where the money for recurrent expenditure is actually going to. Why William Ruto's office is being allocated more funds. Your guess can be as good as mine. And you can now see clearly why we are seeing leaders, even in opposition, joining William Ruto, claiming that they're joining him for development. There is no development here, ladies and gentlemen, because the same government is cutting spending on development. The only development here is that these greedy elected leaders are actually developing their stomachs. Ruto's office is being allocated more money to actually fill the tummies of these greedy elected leaders. That's exactly what is going on here, ladies and gentlemen. And there is no better way to sugarcoat that. These so-called elected leaders, these are a serious letdown to Kenyans. And now the Treasury is asking Parliament to approve of this supplementary budget again of over 5 billion Kenya shillings. Where are our elected leaders now? If these members of Parliament can approve, or rather will approve this, then honestly, any leader supporting Ruto's government, whether that leader is your father-in-law, your mother, Kenyans should reject those leaders. You cannot have a president, already his office has been budgeted for a specific amount of money. The office squanders that money in 7 months. In fact, the office spends more than that in 7 months. And then the office, that leader, asks for more money. Kenyans should reject this. Any leader supporting William Ruto, should Parliament approve of this, Kenyans should reject all leaders supporting William Ruto. Let me stop it there, ladies and gentlemen. If you are watching us but you have not yet subscribed, kindly subscribe, give this video a like.